Now, joining Chris is our next guest presenter and speaker here at the ProFitter Symposium. He is a master's graduate student at the University of Calgary in mechanical engineering. He is in charge of research and development and engineering at AeroLab Tech. Please welcome Matt Singbill. Over to you, Chris and Matt.
Thank you, Steve, for the introduction. As he mentioned, I'm Matt Singbill, field engineer and R&D engineer here at AeroLab Tech. And so I'm going to give a little bit of a walkthrough of our iOS system with Chris, a little bit more detailed than has been done in the videos, and actually set up a test so you guys can see what I'm doing. And we're going to use the P series here behind me and just go through the details of how to use our iOS app. It's pretty straightforward, but obviously I've been working on it for quite a bit, so it's pretty intuitive to me at this point. So I'll just go ahead and launch the app right away. So we have this AeroLink app. And so when you launch the application, you have a list of athletes. So these are the athletes you've linked to in the past and for yourself. So myself as acting as the fitter right now, you can see I have two athletes here. So myself is Matt at AeroLab Tech. So that's me. I can click on that and I can test myself, test my own. So I always have access to testing features without having athletes in case that is a situation you come across. And also have Dave, our software developer here, as an athlete that I have linked with. These are the only athletes I can see. These aren't the only athletes on the system, but this is so we can add privacy for athlete data, because at the highest level, you don't want that getting out. So I'll use Chris now as an example for how we link to an athlete and perform this authentication so that I can then test him and set up his data. So Chris has got his phone out, and if I click here, I enter in test at AeroLab Tech. That's the email that we're going to use today. And if I just press return now, it'll send an authentication email to Chris and let me know that that's happened. So now it goes into the pending athletes location. So we have test AeroLab Tech. I can then click on that athlete, and here's where I'll enter in that authentication code. So Chris should get an email with this code, and he'll have to supply it to me so that this is him accepting that I can see his data now.
In theory, I should get an email. I'm just making sure my Gmail is refreshing. There we go. I have an email that says invitation to test with an AeroLab fitter. My AeroLab fitter code, are you ready?
Yep.
Is 598072.
And so if I enter that in and press confirm, if it's correct, it'll move him to my active athletes. And so just so you're aware, that is not the fixed 6-digit code for Chris forever. So just because he shared that doesn't mean that anyone else can then enter that code and be like, I have Chris now. That's just a one-off code. It goes away after a little while. So now that I have him added, I could click on him and test him, but I know he doesn't have any test configurations. So we're going to go and set up a test as if it's myself, because we have existing test configurations in this for myself. So if I click on me, it goes into my profile. So I have 4 configurations so far. And so the Severo P series AeroLab testing, the Severo Caledonia gravel testing, a giant Propel AeroLab testing, and my giant TCR breakaway testing. So if I click on the P series, we get our configurations. This is the information that we ask you to fill out in order to make a set up a test. So I named it. It can be whatever you want. It doesn't have to be as detailed as that. Put a power meter manufacturer. We like to gather the power meters that are being used. Everyone's a little bit different. We put the power meter location. So this is a spider-based power meter. Our test format is an out and back, as we've mentioned. There are other test formats in development, but this is the only one supported with cloud computations at the moment. Then we put in a bicycle type. So the P series is a UCI time trial bike, and then what's being tested. So this is AeroLab testing. It's other, because we were testing various things, but if I click on what's being tested, you can isolate it to equipment and position, or other. So you put in more detailed notes if one of our options is not what you think you're testing. And so down here, I can put in equipment details and any additional notes I want to write about the configuration that add value to when you look back at your test, what was I doing? So that would be the configuration right there. And these are all similar, just different bikes. And so now if I go click on test, it's these panes at the bottom. I click test, and it launches our test page. So I have to select a configuration. So if I click on there, you'll see my 4 configurations, all of which are out and back. And you can see on the left there, that arrow, that means it's an out and back. You would see something else for a different protocol. So I select this Severo P series, and then I click on surface. So this is the surface you're testing on. So we're going to assume asphalt tarmac for this demo. So you enter now the combined weight as we mentioned in the past. Let me just scroll over. Let me put 79 kilos for me and my bike. Press return. So then we want to do a wheel rollout and enter the wheel circumference of the wheels on the bike at the desired test pressure. So for example, just to change the value, we'll put in 290. And so then this is the lap distance. So this is the cumulative distance over the out plus the back. So in the video, we demonstrated a 400 meter out. That would be an 800 meter lap. So we'll enter in 800 meters here, for example. And so now you're ready to start putting in a little bit more information. So test notes, these are very important so you remember what you were doing after, because it's going to be, if you do a handful of tests over a day, they're going to be in chronological order, but if you don't write down what you're doing, you may forget. So for example, on the P series, I might be testing various wheels. I could make multiple configurations, but for example, I might not want to vary the configuration significantly because it takes time. So I'm going to put in here zip 303s. And I might want to put in the tire pressure I'm running. So I'd probably run 67 front and 71 rear. And for all of you in Europe, that is PSI. I realize you use bar, and I don't know the conversion off the top of my head. So that would be good, like start of test notes, so I can then minimize the keyboard. And so now we want to set up our sensors. So the AeroPro sitting on the table in front of me is AeroPro 531. This one has been authenticated with my account. So I can click on the AeroPro, and if it wasn't there, you could scan for AeroPros by pressing that red circle, and it would scan for any in the area. So now it's initialized connected to. The AeroPro is going to start scanning for ant devices. It didn't find any ant devices. So we have to wake up the power meter and the wheel speed sensor on the P series, which Chris will do for me now. So you just spin the front wheel, the one that has the wheel speed sensor on it, and you just pedal the bike, back pedal it. And so now if you can see the screen again, they should both be awake. I'll wait for the iPad to be streamed again. I can plus the red circle and it'll rescan for ant devices. And so now you can see that there's a power meter and a wheel speed sensor. We have a speed cadence on there as well, but like Kelly mentioned, we don't want to select those for now because the protocol is not supported just yet. So now I would press next, and this starts our test, or gets us ready to start our test. So we're sitting in the pre-test state. So right now would be when you want to send the rider out, and they would get further away from the test location from where they want the GPS point to be. I can still edit the notes now. So let's say the wind picked up. So wind gusts. So for example, I can edit that before the test, and I can minimize the keyboard again. So we have our test time and we have a state here. So if the rider's ready to go, I'd signal the rider ready to start the test, and I would say start. So now the rider has 15 seconds to get up to speed before that first GPS point falls. The minimum speed of a test is about 15 kilometers per hour. And so if at 15 seconds they are not going 15 kilometers an hour, you'd get a failed state. You see next to the red end test that there's a go, there was a go indicator. Now it says error. That means that the 15 kilometers per hour was not met once the test was, once they traveled out. And so they go to an error state. This was a failed test and I'd have to reset up. But for example, just as this is a demo, we didn't expect the test to work. I can still
certainly not with the bike.
Notes.
With the bike on its stand, it's going to fail.
I can edit the notes still. So like, why did they fail? Too slow. Stationary bikes are not fast. So I added some notes there. Now I can press end test. It'll verify if you want to end your test. So press end test, and you get a summary of your test results. So you can see that the notes are at the top there. If you ended the test and something was notable that you forgot to write down, before you sync, you can still add more notes. So I'm going to say add notes. I can check what I had selected. Oh, maybe I entered the wrong mass. I want to write that down. Maybe I just a typo occurred or something like that. We want to check these things so that if you have any concerns, you're aware of them. So then now I'd press sync AeroPro. So now we're going to sync those summary data off the AeroPro device, and it's going to come through the iOS and go to our cloud system. So you can see that it's retrieving data now. And we have average values. They're all set to 0 because nothing happened. This won't cloud process because it is an invalid test. So now if I wanted to retest, in the top right corner, there's a retest button which will save the configuration values we selected previously, or I can dismiss and go and set up a new test. So I'm going to dismiss, And so now we're back to the test page with an empty configuration. We could do that again, set up a new rider, set up a new test, or we can look at our history trends. So if we go to history, which is one of the panes at the bottom, we can see the test we just ran. It's a failed test, 0 CDA, really fast. And it gives you the time and your notes and you can see everything, but we know that's invalid. We're not going to remove anything from your history page without you explicitly telling us, because we want you to have a chronological history of what was done. It's really hard at the end of a day of dozens of tests to remember exactly everything that happened. And it's very important when you go to analyze data later. So this test I want to remove because it's confusing. So if I swipe, I get this delete button, press delete. I'm going to delete that session now. So this cannot be undone from here, but we make sure that the writer or the user has to do this. The data is not lost otherwise. So if I press delete, that one disappears. So then here's a previous test I've performed that has good data, so we can look at how it is covered in the history page. So you have your session summary CDA. This is the one computed from every lap that I did. That's what's displayed here. And the fact that it's highlighted in white means it's being cloud computed. There's a red check mark next to it. So if I click on there, you can see this is cloud validated data. So I have my session values at the top. These are the values, like I said, over the whole session, all laps. 0.224 CDA, 267 watts, 43 kilometers per hour, with a 43.86 kilometer per hour wind, coming in at an average yaw of 2.7. So then here's my post-test notes, if I needed to check anything, and then I have the lap breakdown. So I can click on whichever lap I want and see for that lap, what was my CDA, what was my power, and what yaw, wind conditions, and speed was I traveling. So I can click through these. These are all fairly consistent. I wouldn't have thrown any of these out. But for example, you could mark and remove in the test one of these laps, and it would be noted here that that lap exists, but it's not part of the calculation. And then everything down here is the same information you saw in the post-test previously. So I think that's the general workflow that we wanted to go over today. Anything else you want to touch on?
Thanks, Matt. I mean, I think that does go over quite a bit. There's a mechanism as well to print a report or something as well?
Yes. So right here, if we take this this test that I've done previously, or for example, on the 18th of January, I ran four tests. And if I click on the little red share button in the top right corner here, it'll pull up the standard iOS sharing application that I can send a HTML file to someone. I can even airdrop it to Kelly right now. You're going to get a bunch of reports sent to you. And so he has, right there, he's sitting over in the room.
Yeah, and I only brought that up because it's sometimes valuable for the athlete to get a summary of their day and how their tests went and how they performed. So you can very quickly, with the click of a button, have that sent to your athlete.
Yeah. And for example, that was sending a whole day of testing. It would be multiple pages to Kelly, but if I just wanted to share one particularly interesting result, you click on it, you get the whole summary and everything. And again, in the top right corner, standard iOS sharing. Click on this, and I can even save to files so I can look at it here. I'll put it in my downloads. I think I need to throw it in documents. So if I do that, I can go to downloads, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. Oh, I have one right here. It's fine. Which one is it? This one. We're going to say this one. So this is what you'd be able to share with an athlete post-testing. So they would get to go home with something if they want, and it breaks it down by lap. It's a nice little report. It's all the exact same information, but in an easy shareable format.